call to order the community planning meeting of Monday, June the 12th. And are there any additions to the agenda committee? Hearing none?
The pink.
Oh, and the pink. Other than the pink, which we'll add to correspondence. Are there any other additions? And I don't see any hands. So could Mayor Little a motion to approve the agenda? Councillor App, second. All okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so public participation, and one thing I will be keeping an eye on the time, folks, and generally we ask that comments be put in about 4 minutes. So is there anyone for public participation? Please come up to the microphone.
Good evening. My name is Bev Summers. I live at 519 Whitty Beach Road. I've lived in Metchosin for 38 years and have seen all the changes. Thank you to Mayor Little, Councillor Shipkin, Jeff Lehigh, who is General Manager of the CRD, and Andrew Freer, Senior Park Ranger of Regional Parks, for their prompt reply to my email sent June the 8th. I'm here today because my 6-year-old granddaughter carrying a butterfly net was charged repeatedly by a large unleashed dog by the water's edge on May 21st at Whitty's Beach. She was screaming, pushed into the water fully clothed and traumatized by this event. The owner was a distance away yelling, "He wants the stick." The dog did not return with the command. The dog finally retreated when the owner was at the scene. He never apologized or even came back and asked if she was okay. At this time, the signage at the entrance of the park reads, "For beach and picnic area, dogs not permitted June 1st to September 15th, except when leashed and passing through." This, to me, is an ambiguous signage. The CRD website says dogs can be unleashed walking through the park as long as they are in your sight and under control. Most dog owners will tell you their dog is under control. The present signage means that they can be off leash until they get to the picnic area and upper beach. Then they can be unleashed for I'm just going to repeat that. The present signage means that they can be off leash until they get to the picnic area and upper beach, leashed for 50 feet, and then their dogs go free. Why would people leash for 50 feet? Thousands of families and school children walk through the park to the beach on a narrow path in the summer months. Dog numbers have greatly increased since COVID. I fail to understand why dog owners have preference over small children and families. We have a very sensitive wild bird environment. The unleashed dogs are free to chase the birds. Between the increase in newts overtaking the right side of the beach, the unleashed dogs on the beach, I feel that this is not a family-friendly environment any longer. I would like to see a more simple signage that requires all dogs to be on leash while in the park. Most people will follow the signage if it is a simple and straightforward signage. I feel it is time for the CRD to be talking to the federal government about protecting the areas below the high tide mark. I hope me being here today will make a difference. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Summers. Committee, I made a little oversight. I did realize that Ms. Summers was going to be here to talk about this, and I think there's a deeper issue that we should take on as a committee, and I have a simple action request. So I'm wondering if I could actually add dogs in CRD parks under business arising on item 6. And I've got a few thoughts on some simple steps that we could take just to get a little bit more information. So any objections to doing that? Councillor Donaldson?
I think we've had this discussion before about adding things later. Maybe it'd be better if we put it into your councillor's update. I don't know. Tina might be able to.
Ms. Hanson, any guidance for us?
I could suggest that you put it under other business since you also have applicants waiting for.
Yeah, okay. Gotcha. Okay, let's do other business then. And now I believe that adding an agenda item after, sorry, Councillor Gray, go ahead.
I'll move to amend the agenda as
Second.
Okay,
suggested.
thank you. And any discussion further? Call the question, all in favor? Thank you very much. Okay, any more for public participation? Mr. Starr.
Thanks, Mike Starr, 449 William Head Road. I just want to voice my opposition to the increasing the operating hours or the liquor license hours for the Mile Zero. I live less than 100 meters away in direct sight. And it'll impinge, 11 o'clock is just too late, so I believe it'll impinge on my right to peaceful enjoyment of my property. Thanks, that's it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else for
I'm not sure if this is the right place.
your last opportunities tonight? Anyone else?
Good evening, everyone. With regard to the Weir's Trail report, I looked it over today, and I want to thank everybody who worked so hard to pull it together. I know it's been a lot of work. I have two quibbles with the report. First of all, the traffic has decreased, the parking traffic and incidents have decreased, not since the pandemic was over, but since the trail was closed. That's, pardon me, this is regard to the Weir's Beach Trail. And secondly, I, along with most of my neighbors, was waiting to hear from the committee about the neighborhood meeting. Unless somebody had called me last night, I would not have known that this was up for debate again. And I guess what I want to say is that I think there's some question about the desirability of how public that access is. And my question for the council is, what is your global plan, your long-term plan for Weir's Beach? Because we have population increase all over the place, and they have not accounted for green places. And so they're coming out here because we have. And that beach, like Whitty's, well, less so Whitty's perhaps, but certainly Weir it's a limited space. It has limited capacity, not just for parking, but also for people. And it's at maximum use in the summer now. It's not a problem in the winter. It is in the summer. And so I guess I would like you to consider the other issues aside from just the technical question of building a trail, but rather the other issues that follow from that. If you build a better mousetrap, they will come. And so when you fix that trail, and the neighborhood does need it, and we use it, but when you build that trail, we're going to get more people. It's that simple. And saying call the RCMP doesn't work. It took them an hour and a half when I made my call. They were up in Bear Mountain. And the other thing is that I would like us to consider other options. If I want to go to Bear Mountain now, I have to pay a $20 user fee. It seems as though homeowners associations have more power to govern their areas than municipal councils, and that's not fair. If we don't deal with this now, it's going to get worse. It's fixing the trail is not going to do it. So that's all I have to say about the trail. And thank you for all the work that's been done on it. And your name, please? Michelle Jones, 5290 William Road.
Thanks. Thanks, Ms. Jones. Anyone else for public participation?
Patty Whitehouse, Rocky Point Road. First to the comments about the horrible Whitty's Beach issue. Again, it's not the dogs, it's the irresponsible people. If the CRD adopted the principles that Council is prepared to adopt with respect to what under control means and enforced it, there would not be, or at least this kind of problem would be extremely rare. But what I was actually going to say tonight was I was down again on the poop patrol on Taylor Beach this Sunday and found several new burning fire, that several new fires had been there. I'm wondering whether maybe it's time to erect a very large sign that says beach fires cause impotence. Or something else that would get through to the irresponsible people that are violating our bylaws.
Go ahead, Mr. Moore.
Michael Morgan, Vision Way, owner of Miles Brewing. Chair, I have a handout here that may help with some of my comments. Am I able to provide it to council?
You can, sure.
Clearly too
Need to be coordinated.
Okay.
All right, I will speak as quickly as possible and make this succinct. I apologize for not being able to be present at the last meeting. I was unfortunately out of the province traveling. I would like to provide some clarification and corrections to some of the information that's been provided. Most notably, I'll start with the staff report. In the most recent report, the hours that are listed for us that we currently have are Monday to Thursday, 2 to 9, Friday and Saturday, 11 to 9, and Sunday 11 to 8. That's actually incorrect. Our current hours are Monday through Thursday 2 to 8, Friday 2 to 9, Saturday is 11 till 9, and Sunday is 11 till 8. I also want to note that the staff report didn't include information about special permit hours, so I did provide some of that there. For special event permits, they are for an inside event 9 a.m. to 2 a.m. the following day, and if it's outdoors, it's 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. At the last meeting, Councillor Gray made a number of comments that I think should be clarified or corrected. He made statements regarding that after 2 consultations, the Liquor Board accepted the hours that were put forward by Council. Unfortunately, it's inaccurate and overly simplistic of the actual situation. What happened is after the initial consultation with the district, we made the decision to change our hours with Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch. And we changed them to the hours that we had talked with Council on. So that is why those hours came about. Not that Liquor and Cannabis Regulation overruled our request. We changed our request as a show of good faith, acknowledging that we would seek an extension to hours if at a later time if we thought it was warranted and there was demand for it, which we now have. Second, it was stated that Mile Zero is a bar. It's not accurate. We're not a bar. Bars are typically licensed under liquor primary. We are not. We are under a liquor manufacturing license. Third, it was mentioned that Mile Zero Brewing is applying for the maximum allowable hours. That's false. Categorically false. Section 17.2.7 of the LCRB policy actually states that hours may be approved between 9 a.m. and 4 a.m. the following day. The hours we're requesting are 11 a.m. to 11 p.m., far under the maximum allowable hours. It was stated that stat hours was the one question that Liquor Board did not decide on. It's not entirely accurate. Liquor Board doesn't consider stat hours. They consider hours for the day of the week. So they consider a Monday to be a Monday. They leave it up to the business to determine their operating hours on stat holidays. It was stated that we are now a licensed facility instead of a manufacturer's license. That is false. We are entirely under a manufacturing license. While all facilities that have alcohol are licensed in one way or another, our licensing has not changed since our original application. And finally, it was stated that LCRB uses 500 meters for the consultation. That's actually not correct. Section 11.12.5 of the LCRB policy actually stipulates that residents within 0.8 of a kilometer or 800 meters are sought for public consultation. And that was actually what was placed on our 4-foot by 8-foot sign in front of our establishment during that. So quickly wrapping up to keep myself under the 4 minutes. It's unfortunate because it appears that we've been subject to a great deal of bias and discrimination, especially in regards to our most recent application here for this extension of hours. when really we're asking for hours that are still far under those available to every other licensed premises in the district. It's also my opinion that there may be a conflict of interest on council, as stated by my partner Michelle at the last planning meeting, and as indicated in the staff report. Part of the reason we are seeking an extension of hours is to allow us to host special or private events, where an individual may request a later time than what's currently allowed under our license. So if someone says, I want to have a wedding reception here, can you have us here till 10? Councillor Gray is a trustee of the community hall, and the community hall does rent out for special events. If these events have alcohol sales, they would be subject to special event permits. Currently, the community hall can operate under special event permits that go later than the hours we are requesting. This would lead me to believe that there may be a conflict of interest, and compounding this is Councillor Gray's comments at the last planning meeting regarding whether hours that could be granted to Mile Zero Brewing under a special event permit could also be limited. It's my opinion that we may be subject to some discrimination and bias by members of council. If Councillor Gray is in a conflict of interest, then his extensive comments, some of which have needed correcting today, as well as his voting and putting forward motions at the last planning meeting on this subject, has furthered that possible bias and discrimination. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan.
Beth Bacon, the chosen resident. I have a bias. I don't want a liquor establishment there. I want them to manufacture their product, allow people to sample it, sell it, and have the people go home. And we have the right as landlords to say what will happen on our property. So that property belongs to me. It belongs to everybody in the chosen. We have other tenants to consider. We have neighbors to consider. I find this person being very demanding, accusatory, and my bias is sample it, buy it, take it home. No special events, no staying open late. And I don't see it as competition with anything else because they started out just to be manufacturing a product. So they've gone a long way from where they started. And I don't think we have to go along with them. And we have the right as landlords to say, up with this, we will not play.
Thanks, Beth.
Mike Ballard, a chosen resident. I don't believe they're asking for too much, because if you want to go to the cafe, you can go there and get scrambled eggs, a steak, and a beer first thing in the morning. So, just for perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And name and street number, please. Or street address, street name.
Sue Panton, 5129 Sandgate Road. Just briefly to comment about the Weir Beach Trail. It is, I'm in favor. I think the report is comprehensive. I think there's been a collaboration and articulation of the needs of the residents and the larger community. One question for council is, Whitty's is CRD?
Yes.
What is Taylor and Weir's Beach?
Those are, well, of course, the shoreline is federal jurisdiction, but the access points and the beachfront itself is Machosen managed land.
So I think that's important to take into consideration because, as somebody else has mentioned, the population has exploded out there. But not only that, it's such a finite little beach that to have the access points open for emergency purposes, Pearson College students who come down Pearson College Road, they're coming from all over the world, and that we can call it a bridle path, like the bridle path along Devonian. I completely disagree with parking there. In discussion with neighbors and witnessing it ourselves, parking and traffic down there, and in consultation with Chief Dunlop, who has done an incredible job mitigating accidents and yellow lines and whatnot to keep our community safe, but to keep it strictly as a pedestrian path and absolutely no parking. The other thing that council needs to be aware of is that the campground there over the last 2 summers has taken over the beach. So it's cut the beach in half again. So as you're walking the beach, you go down to one end, you literally can't walk because people are putting structures, chairs, tents, boats, they bungee cord them to driftwood, and so the beach is now cut in half, which is everybody now using the, I don't know, whatever, the Sandgate end of the beach. It's just something for council to be aware of, is the usage. And then just finally is the dogs, because they're literally left to run wild. For shorebirds, for families, we often hear people yelling at each other, my dog's friendly. It's like, well, your dog is charging or walking over people's blankets or eating their food, and it's just a consideration for the multi-use of that beach.
Ms. Stanton, one question though. This is your observation of Weir's Beach, what you're seeing there?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
And if we do have a problem, who do we call?
Well, us.
Well, no,
The
Sorry.
administration.
not me,
No, not.
but the district office.
Yeah, okay.
And I'll touch on some of those points when we get to the other business around dogs, in terms of who to call them. Yeah. Yeah.
Hello, Adjourn, 5283 William Head Road. I'm one of the neighbors directly affected by the Weir's Beach trail. I believe the trail should be open. I've communicated that, tried to participate. The one thing I am understanding, that trail was closed for safety reasons. The recommendations for dealing with parking, I think, are wholly unsatisfactory and do not respect the safety concerns of my family, that of my child, the use of my driveway, that of my neighbors. I want it to be opened and returned to its prior state and made use for the neighbors, my neighbors, the participants of our community. Not everyone driving. I don't think it's a safe place whatsoever. Safe speeds or parking lot speeds, no one does it. Mayor, you and I had near misses twice in one visit with buses. Parking should not be allowed the way it's been recommended. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further for public participation? Okay, thank you very much, and we'll move now into the rest of the agenda. Okay, so adoption of minutes, the community planning meeting of May 8th. Any comments, or could I have a motion to adopt?
Move adoption.
Councillor Epp, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor of adoption? Great. And receipt of minutes. And this is for the Bufferland Working Group of May 9th. Any comments, or could I have a motion to receive these minutes?
Motion to receive.
Councillor Donaldson, seconded by Councillor Gray. Any discussion? Marilyn?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks to the Bufferlands Working Group. This is a lot of work. I know it's taken a lot of work on behalf of both of you, Councillor Shukin and Donaldson, and the members of the group. So thanks very much for convening that and for your ongoing work.
Great. Thanks very much. With no further comments, I'll call the question. All in favor of receipt? Thank you. And the Bylaws Working Group public input meeting of May 17th, and I'll just make a little comment, but can I have a motion to receive the minutes?
Motion to receive.
From Councillor Donaldson, second from Mayor Little. Just before the vote, that was a very good meeting. On the 17th, we had 25 people out, so we heard from a number of community members, certainly not all of the community who have an interest in the bufferland. There are just a few key themes that we heard that night. So there was lots of support for rezoning the bufferland away from commercial recreational as it stands right now, and some discussion about what a new zone could be other than just simply straight park. So that's something that the working group is going to look into. So I characterize it as a continued astonishment about the covenant allowing for the stormwater detention ponds, but we made it very clear that that covenant is in place. It is legally binding on both parties, and the covenant and easement is very much a two-way street, and I think work is underway right now to make sure that those streets flow effectively and smoothly. So there was not a lot of support given for the CRD's involvement in the future of the bufferland. One or two voices, but not a lot of support overall. There was a sense of the fate of the bufferland was important for all the chosen, and not a great desire to open the lands up as a come one, come all park. So, and finally there was, I think, a universal view on the importance of finding out more about the developer's plans for the Central Mountain Estates. That is a critical aspect of the future of the bufferland. There will be upwards of 312 homes that will be developed in the area just immediately adjacent to the bufferland. And as we heard that night, they plan to build right up to the border of where Metchosin begins. So, and with that, without any further comments, if there are no further comments, call the question. And all in favor, receipt. Thank you. Okay, so nothing for business arising. Next we have the request for a development permit for 3667 Park Drive. And just excuse me one sec.
Councillor Shuka,
Please.
were you going to put the CRD, dogs in CRD parks in business arising, or?
We'll do that in other business.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Great. So just a brief recap of this issue. So a development permit was requested for 367 Park Drive, with the focus being the development of a single story garage of about 807 square feet. So council did a site tour on June 6th, where we had a chance to talk with both the owner and their engineer. And a key question around this was stormwater management and the need to address the effective impervious area, which will involve the development of a swale type water retention pit from the garage, and also the removal of a driveway to make that surface pervious as opposed to impervious. And of course, the reason for all this is that this particular residence is within the Shoreland Slopes development permit area, and the garage itself is within 60 meters of the shoreline. So there is a requirement for a development permit. We have on page 17 of the planning agenda 3 options, again, that are possibly before us. One is to grant the development permit. The second is to request more information from staff. And the third is to deny the application. So I'll throw just a reminder of those 3 options, but I was hoping to hear from the committee on their thoughts. Councillor?
Well, I was quite impressed with that both the homeowner and the engineer had really done due diligence as far as the property and what their plan is. They seem to have everything covered and be actually under a lot of the requirements that we are better than the requirements that we actually have. So I think I would like to move option 1 to issue development permit 22-02, permit construction of a 1-story 75 square meter garage at 3667 Park Drive. No, Ms. Hanson, do you need me to read out all of it?
No, you don't have to
Okay.
read it out.
Thank you.
Just option 1.
Okay. So Councillor Epp has made a motion for option 1. That's second. And any discussion? Marilyn?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Epp. I'd also like to thank the applicant for applying for this DP permit before he began work. It was also really great to hear from their engineer from Ryzik. And so we all asked a number of different questions, and that just shows the beauty of having site visits. As we're reminded by residents, we really need to see these sites, and that was beneficial for me. So I will be voting in favor of the motion.
Great. Thanks very much. Councillor Thomas?
Yeah, I would agree as well. It was very comprehensive. It was great to be able to actually envision right before us where the water would go. And they're certainly taking into consideration not taking down as many trees they first originally had proposed to us, removing the pavement that's there, and being very cognizant of what may or may not happen with that shoreline. So considering that there are some other developments that have been going on in the neighborhood, which they were aware of as well, they want to make sure that they cross their T's and dot their I's, so they're very careful of the environment and where it's going to affect their neighbors as well as themselves.
Great, thank you. Councillor Gray?
Yeah, I'll echo those comments. Just to say, just a caution for staff, the draft development permit 2202 at page 21 says the removal of 4 trees at item 3. It's corrected at item 4 where it says 2 trees, but I think what we're agreeing to tonight under option 1 is 2 trees be removed. I think that's really the one part of all of this that we're ending up doing, is saying that everything else looks really good in terms of our requirements. It's just the loss of these 2 trees, but let's make it 2, not 4.
Yeah, okay, great point. And yeah, again, just to flag that, option 1 does say the removal of 2 trees, which we learned that case. So any further comments on this development permit? So with that, I will call the question. All in favor? And none opposed. Thank you very much. Okay, so we next get to item 7B, which is the additional information and the request to amend hours of the existing liquor license around Mile Zero Brewery. Now, before I begin this, Councillor Gray, did you want to address the comments that Mr. Morgan made around conflict of interest potential?
I'd love to address them, but I think that first, if you could give me a moment, I'd like to have a word with our CAO just about the circumstance I find myself in. I would have a wholesome response to this, but
okay,
so I would have a moment.
Do you want to step away from the table and
yeah, just for a moment?
We can is it?
Say, I would suggest you do recess for 5 minutes.
Great. So we'll recess for a few minutes.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
I'm getting stiff.
So my recommendation committee, it would be to postpone this discussion so that we can confirm the existence or non-existence of conflict of interest, given the fact that it was brought up at tonight's meeting, and obviously we're not able to confirm that at this moment. So that would be my suggestion, to postpone the discussion.
Okay, great. I'm in favor of doing that. Now, I think we need a motion to postpone.
Yes.
Okay. Can I?
And should I be involved in the motion to postpone?
Could I have a motion to postpone? Councillor Donaldson, seconded by Mayor Little. And any discussion?
So, so we're not going to discuss the issue at all, and because unfortunately people have come here for this specific reason, so I would suggest that when it's on an agenda future, that we make extra effort to reach out to the community to inform them that this will be reread or readdressed.
Okay. Councillor.
And I would also like to make sure that that when it comes up next time, the report, that a lot of this information that is possibly not correct, that the report would make sure that all the correct information is included in the next report.
Okay. Okay. Let's. Great. Good point. Maybe we'll deal with that separately if we can. Just we'll deal with the postponement. But Councillor Craig.
Yeah, I'll just offer that I'll seek legal advice between now and the next planning committee, so we can set up now in terms of giving full notice to everybody that I'll have that and know what I'm doing in the next planning committee meeting. And it's already in the schedule, so that'll work, I think.
Okay, sounds good. Any further comments? Okay, so I'll call the question on postponing this item. Okay, all in favor? I just back to Councillor App's comments.
I was just going to also make a comment that if we can request that any submissions do not be made to council members during the meetings that we've just previously discussed, because it gives staff, we do not have the opportunity, same with council members, to either absorb the information right at that moment, or same likewise for staff as well.
Okay. I wonder if I could recommend to Mr. Morgan, who presented this information, that he submit it to the planner.
Yes.
And then that be factored into the next report, and I think that's how we could do that. So, Mr. Morgan, is that okay?
The handout provided to...
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, I can email that to the planner.
Great. Okay. Okay.
So with respect, I'm not sure if the planner can comment on points that were made by Councillor Gray.
Exactly.
I'm wondering if, how are we going to do this? So if you do not declare conflict of interest, you'll have these comments here, these questions and comments that you'll be able to reply to.
I'll answer to each one of them.
Right, and then if you do declare a conflict of interest, I guess we'll have to take this under advisement in our deliberations regarding.
Yeah. Okay.
But certainly the planner can talk about the information about the permit hours and the liquor license hours as listed.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Marilyn. So, Councillor Gray, anything?
That works well.
Okay.
I think some of them are factual errors in the documents we received, so they just need to be corrected.
Correct.
And others are a question of colloquialisms or whatever, so it's all good.
Okay. Okay. Great. We will move on to the next agenda item, which is the request for development variance permit for 1585 Zanita Drive, Zanita Heights. Okay. Okay. So the issue here is staff have asked us to approve notification of the residents living within 60 meters of the property that is the subject of the development variance permit, or the DVP. And the key variance we're looking at here is that the landowners have requested the setback from the principal residence to be 46.3 meters versus the 15 meters that is part of the secondary suite regulation. within the land use bylaw. So the property is zoned uplands, and so it's just under 10 hectares and acres in size. The rationale for the variance in the setback is the challenging topography around the main residence, the desire to minimize impact to native vegetation in that area, and that the proposed house or secondary suite site can use the existing driveway. Now, I'd be curious and interested to hear the committee's views on this, and as we've done in the past, I would like to, unless we are on side with denying the application or recommending that council deny the application, I would suggest that we begin notification of the nearby neighbors and then arrange a site visit so we can see this in person. So, but committee, your thoughts? Councillor Johnson.
Yes, so when I'm looking at this and considering the original deliberations of how we came to have detached suites and attached suites, and the purposes of those. And with the detached suites, they were to be within 15 meters of the house, the door facing the principal residence, up to 15 meters or as close as 1 meter. And the purpose of that is, one, there was a real fear in the community, and I believe it still does exist, that we don't have two houses, not talking about suites, but two separate houses on a property. Now that this is an uplands zoning as well, the other concerns with upland zoning, of course, is wells and septic. And in this particular application, they're asking for a completely separate septic field as well. I think a site visit's definitely warranted. We've got some photos here, they're not that legible, but as we found with other site visits, seeing is a better comprehension of what's actually there. So even though this is like triple the distance of where we would normally recommend, I'd like to actually see what this actually looks like. How close, or is it visible, or what is the lay of it? The proponent actually has only been on this property just a few years. So they bought the facility, the property, knowing what they had right there before them, for their family.
Well said. Anyone else? Councillor.
Well, I agree with you, I'd have a site visit, because I think your plan is sound.
Okay. If there are no further comments, I'm wondering if I could ask one of the committee members to move option 1 with the addition that we have staff look at site visit with the property owners.
So moved.
Councillor Epp has made the motion to support option 1 with the addition of the site visit. Seconded, please. Mayor Little, thank you. Any discussion? Councillor Gray.
I'd just like to echo Councillor Donaldson's comments that, so when I look at it too, I get the feeling that, well, wait a minute, it seems so obvious when I read the documents that there can't be a secondary house or detached suite close to the house as it would be required. So it almost feels like a buyer beware situation. The property maybe isn't appropriate for a secondary house, certainly under the existing rules. So that's the part that has me a little bit uncertain, but I think going and seeing the place might be a big help in that regard. Mm-hmm. Just to understand so on one hand it's like, well, it's a no-go, so what's the rationale here, and let's take a look at the place and see what's what.
Very much. Marilyn.
I understand your concerns, and there are many secondary suites that have been built without our approval, without the requirements. Saying that, I'm not saying it's right, but I do want to remind Council that we are also in a housing crisis, and we want to also show the province that we are considering housing options within our area, within our OCP, and so I think we have to be cautious what we say and how we vote. Over the last 4 years, we gave out variances almost 100%. I think it was 100% of the time for lots of different reasons, for outcrops, croppy parts, for topography, for trees, for lots of different reasons. So I think the site visit will be very informative for us. Okay.
Councillor Gray?
Through the chair, if I may thank the mayor, exactly, and keeping an open mind is key. And that's why I'd like to go and hear a little bit more from the proponents.
Great. Yeah, personally, I find this one quite challenging in terms of the distance being 3 times greater than the required setback, the regulated setback. So, yeah, site visit would be good to undertake. So, okay. Any further comments? Okay, so the motion to support option 1, I will call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Great. So we next move to the councillor's update, and there's only one item on the councillor's update, which is the report. Where's each, and I'll just get there. Okay, so just a quick recap. So again, the trail was closed on the advice and by way of a council resolution on October 3rd of 2022. So it was one of the last actions that the previous council took. And then this came back to the planning committee on January 16th of this year. And at that meeting, we referred the issue back to the Parks and Trails Advisory Committee. A subcommittee was formed from PTAS to look at the trail and what were the options for the trail itself and also for parking and traffic management. And so what was interesting is that the folks from PTAS were pretty clear with me that they didn't feel that they had expertise in terms of parking and traffic management. So I undertook that on my own and had meetings and a site visit with both the fire chief, who's been there as an enforcement person in terms of parking, and also our public works lead to talk about some of the actions that could actually be possibly put in place to physically prevent parking, especially in the no parking zones, which apparently have been used in the past. So the recommendations themselves were developed after I had a chance to meet with the adjacent landowners. I think we did 3 site visits with PTAS representatives, one of which involved a visit with the engineer as well. So we had a really great first site visit. Mr. Hanan was there along with the other site visit, the other owner, and we talked about a number of options: rerouting the trail alignment, possibly removing the berm, the possibility of anchoring more substantive stairs to the beach. And what generally we came to in sum was that the best option is to return to a naturally formed trail that had the benefit of some more engineering expertise so we could make a stronger, more resilient trail, but essentially keep it in the condition it is now, which is a natural trail. And quite frankly, there will still be some risk in terms of stepping down. It is a steep area, and that is the reality. One of the things that we tried to look at was removing the hump, but as I mentioned in the report, that would have involved the removal of at least 2, but maybe 3 mature trees. So, and of course, there's some risk too when you dig into an area and you don't know what's below. So, again, so the recommendation is to return to a natural trail, and in terms of the work that needs to be done, there's 4 elements here. The natural trail concept, that we try and keep the work within $15,000, and that the work plan that is developed by staff consider labor from contractors, public works, PTAS, and other sources, potentially folks from the William Head Institution. There is a question about an encroachment issue on one of the neighbors' properties, and that has to be addressed as well. So, and also that remediation work begin as soon as possible. So, sorry, one of the other aspects of this is we looked at the trail. I think all of us recognize, the more we talked, especially to the neighbors, we do recognize that there is an issue on the beaches, and Ms. Jones raised that very articulately. But in terms of the issues that we could grapple with in terms of the assignment given to us by the committee and council, we just couldn't look at the beach issues at this moment. I think that this is something that we should dig a little further into in terms of enforcement on the beach. And interestingly, we talked about dogs tonight, and we're going to return to that very shortly here. But that's not an issue that we felt that we could grapple with adequately on this particular question. So my request is that the committee pass a motion supporting the recommendations in terms of reopening and rehabilitating the Weir Beach Trail. So sort of further ado, I'll turn it over to comments from the committee.
Yeah, I agree. I appreciate the amount of time and energy that yourself and the residents and staff have put into this. I'm quite familiar with this trail, and I like the fact that it's a neighborhood trail. And what you're proposing here makes sense, not to encroach any further on the neighbors on either side of that trail. Try to get it back to its natural state the best as possible, that it is safe, and it might mean that, like the Weir Beach stairs, that we have to monitor that year to year to see depends what you're going to uncover there. I'm assuming we're going to talk about the parking thing separately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, I have comments on that.
Great. Any further comments? If not, could I ask for a motion to support the recommendations as outlined in the councillor's update regarding the trail?
So moved.
Councillor Donaldson moved that motion. Seconder, Mayor Lund. And discussion on the motion before us. Mayor Lund.
Yeah, I think this is a great plan. Your comments regarding other sources, in particular neighbors. We do have one of the neighbors with significant engineering. Well, he's an engineer, but he's got significant experience in aquatic environments. And that was very gracious of him to offer his support of that and support of a public trail. And then also we know that we've used William Head Institution in the past, the work crews for many projects, and that's a great suggestion as well. So thank you.
Okay. Councillor.
Excuse me, Councillor Donaldson through the chair. I just remembered how much for this type of remediation did we budget for? I think it was more than this, wasn't it?
You could look it up. I brought the budget.
If you don't know offhand, that's fine.
No, it was in the vault. This vault.
It's near that. Yeah. Okay,
So
thank you.
if I can answer that, so we put aside $50,000 for trail work this year, which would include this.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
thanks.
Yeah. Great. Councillor Gray.
Yeah, I'll support the motion. I think this is a nice solution to the problem that we were facing. And I like the price point better than the alternative that we had been looking at earlier at, I think, $55,000. So this is a much nicer thing. And I like the idea that it'll be a natural trail. I think that suits the area nicely. And we heard from a few residents here too, but they're concerned about a lot of traffic there, traffic on the trail, I think. But as you point out, it won't be, it's a steep trail, but we're replacing what was there before, and I think it served well for many years. So, I like what you've done. Thank you so much.
Great.
Thanks to the group who've been working on it.
And based on the discussion with the engineer, I believe that we will be able to do a much more robust trail in terms both of durability over the years and safety as well. So, okay. So further comments? Hearing none, I will call the question. All in favor of the motion? Great, that passed. Okay. So parking and traffic management was also given to the committee and as part of this task. And it's interesting, in the site visits that I made to the trail, I quickly came to understand that this is probably one of the most dangerous areas in terms of traffic safety in Metchosin. And it just doesn't take you very long to understand that. What I'm to understand is that over the years, things have become better, and they've become better because of active enforcement by the District of Metchosin. Now, are they perfect? Apparently not, no. And I totally sympathize with the neighbors who live in the area, and they've taken steps to protect their properties and on the adjacent side. But I recognize it is not always going to be enough. What I'm to understand, though, is that those neighbors do have the phone number of the fire chief, and so if there is a problem that appears, they can put in a quick call. And with that, we've also heard in the last few weeks that the fire chief is aware that summertime is here and that patrols need to be stepped up in terms of enforcing the no parking zones. So what I've suggested with the recommendation here is that, there is one area that is really bright for parking, but it seems to have been led to haphazard parking that basically almost runs itself into the neighbor's fence and into their yard. So in speaking with the Public Works lead, we thought that we could have barriers put up there, simple barriers to prevent parking, which would also free up the transit zone as well. And again, that there are no parking signs, and these need to continue to be enforced. And the RCMP be notified that this is an area of concern. Well, it's not so much that the RCMP come and respond to incidents, but they should be able to step up patrols. We've heard that from Superintendent Preston, that if we can identify certain areas, they will have a presence there. So again, that is part of the recommendation. And then when we know that the time is right for additional parking in these areas, that we step up enforcement, and we even take steps potentially with pylons or something to ensure that there is no parking in the no parking zones. Okay, great. Those four elements are part of my recommendation. And again, as we go along, if there's new ideas that will allow us to manage the situation there more effectively, I think we should be open to them. So, any comments on this part? Mayor Lund?
Yeah, this is really a problem area, and I was out there several times, and there was one time when there was a really near miss. Somebody could have been killed right while we were watching, because there was a bus barreling over the hill, and people there. So I'm in favor of having no parking signs in areas as such. I would like to have the other signs put up that a minimum of 2-hour stay. Because the unintended consequences of providing parking there is that people are coming early in the morning with their families and their toys and their picnics, and they're staying for 8 or 9 hours. And then they must have very large bladders, because there's no latrines or loos down there. And what has happened is that the neighbors are having people use their lawns as facilities as well. The neighbor, there was a pail just when we arrived. The neighbor had gone and done surveillance and picked up another pail load of garbage and loos or doggy poop bags. And so I think that having a limit on the stay in those 3 parking spots that are across the road from the trail would really help. A 2-hour limit or a 3-hour limit, I think, would be, and then we would enforce it. And I think across the road there is room for 3 cars, but often people do 4 and 5. So I think we need to put up barriers as well. along there, because it depends what we want to do. I think this should be a community trail, and people can go there with a limited time. So it's accessible to people that don't live in the area, but they should have equal opportunity. So I think the limit on the parking, and we would of course have to enforce it, I think would be sensible.
Okay. Councillor.
This really brings up quite a large issue that's looming and getting bigger every year, especially this time of year, and that is enforcement. Because right now, we just basically on weekends, we're asking the chief to basically volunteer her time to be out there enforcing, people lighting beach fires and people parking and where they're not supposed to park and things like that. And this is, we're asking for more and more enforcement, and people are asking for it. And I think council really needs to take a hard look at how we're going to staff this enforcement when it's apart from regular hours.
Great, thanks. That's a great point. After this motion is dealt with, I wanted to talk about some of the other issues connected with this. We're talking about dogs, but there's also on Weir's Beach, there's the use of the beach by other residents who are, we've heard the story about chaining toys and craft and whatnot. So it's basically the beach is becoming a proprietary area for seemingly certain people. I think that is another topic. I'd like to see if we can get into that. And Mayor Little, I don't know if I totally support the minimum 2-hour stay signs, because in some ways I don't know what that does. I think it might actually just cycle more people through the beach. But I actually, the other thing is I think it may be part of that bigger question as to how to manage the beaches, both in terms of dogs, garbage, bathrooms. So I'm wondering if we might be able to take that up separately. What I might suggest in terms of the parking and traffic management, that we look at additional options for signs as well, and add that as a sort of a fifth element to the parking management things. And that could include the time stay, or the limited time stay. So, good, okay. Councillor Gray.
I appreciate all the effort that's gone into this. I was wondering, and I don't have any background information to suggest, but are we going to have people not just parking up the roadways, so closer to the institutional William Head, and then walking the way down, and will that be dangerous then? So maybe there's more to talk about the initiatives you've got here, but then observing and watching and seeing what happens next, because there may be some, knock-on effect, unintended consequence, let's say, from what we do here. So I'm going to suggest that we do what you've suggested, or recommended, excuse me, and then keep an eye, because and maybe bring it back at this particular point, just have an update on how's it going. The other thing I wondered about was in terms of enforcement, different kind of enforcement. I heard, not tonight, but a previous night, that, and I don't know the veracity of this, but that there's certain times shift change at the prison where there's a lot of action. So isn't that a time when it wouldn't be the fire chief involved in that, that would be the RCMP? Or having a word with the leadership at the prison to say, hey, we've got this big problem here. Maybe there could be a staff meeting and people could sit down and talk about it and figure out a way to to cool things off. I think it's worth a try anyway. It's not a huge ask to say drive at the speed limit and be careful in this particular corner, and it might be amenable to that kind of fix. Now maybe there needs to be a regular staff meeting once every 6 months or something, but I think it's worth an effort. And then if the buses are barreling along, well then that's a word of BC Transit, so maybe a word of the Commission, Mayor Little.
Now, what I've heard about the shift changes at the prison is the times are pretty regular. Mm-hmm. So you could set up patrols there if need be at that time. Councillor.
I mentioned that several times to the RCMP.
Oh, good.
So I don't know if they ever actually go there or not, but it might be they don't go. Well, I guess they need reminding then.
Okay. Mary Lou?
I have brought this up with the warden at the William Head prison, but I'll remind him again to remind his staff. But that still doesn't address the issue of the parking. And so the buses, it's not at shift change, the buses run regularly there. And people seem to just really go fast on that curve. And more likely, Councillor Gray, is people will probably park up College Drive as opposed to going up William Head Road. And I'd almost wish they would, because then it would give them a pause so when they cross the road. What is happening now is that cars are parked on the road, kids are jumping out of the car into the traffic. It's really horrific. And there will be an accident there if we don't do something. It is just, and I've seen pictures of people walking across the road with a canoe on their head. And do you think, my goodness, with a canoe on their head, seriously? And other kids out on the road without their parents are packing the car and they're out on the road. So that the traffic issues, mitigating the speeds or slowing the speeds will not mitigate what the real problem is, and it's parking there. I'd rather them park up the drive, up College Drive, as opposed to right on William Head Road.
And as I understand it, right now there are 3 or 4 parking spots up Pearson College Drive that can be accessed. One of the things that I asked our Public Works lead is whether it was possible to put barriers up the hill as you head toward where it flattens out toward the prison. And his view was that would be really problematic. And what the barriers, I would hope, would do is that you just physically do not have a place to park there at all. He raised some safety issues, but also issues with snow clearing and even just maintaining the barriers, because the shoulder isn't actually that wide before it actually hits a ditch, as I recall it now. So we did look at the possibility of actually really creating obstacles to any cars being in that area. So again, deemed not safe, not optimal. So, sorry, Councillor Gray.
Yeah, I just want to offer, I was talking a multi-pronged approach. So let's go to the speeders, we can speak to them, and talking to the warden's a great idea, Mary Little. Talking to the commission, to the bus people, their employees, so they'll be receptive to, would feel certain. There's the parking issue. Is there any sense, Councillor Shukin, having saying parking is over there on whatever street it is?
College Drive.
You put a sign saying parking is available up that other way.
Yeah.
So let's not lose sight of any of the ideas, but why don't we build and see what's working, and maybe nothing will work, but at least try to get this in line.
Yeah. Great. Councillor Jones.
Yes, the days that I've been there, I've seen them all park right on the bus stop side where the neighbors are, right where the trail is. It's absolutely mayhem stopping the bus. I don't know where people are going to go. I didn't look close enough to the other side, actually, because there weren't cars on that side. So I don't know. Is that a no parking zone in that whole neighborhood? I know that people don't read no parking signs. We see it in this corridor. We see it on market day. But I have to say, what does work is the pylons. So we've been setting them up the last couple of Sundays. And I don't know, it's just something about those orange things. And they're pretty inexpensive, but people they see them, they're alert. But a no parking sign, they're ignored.
Exactly.
It's happened on garage sale day. We've had Merrymaker Market. It's happened here on the grounds with the farmers market. People really are not reading. They're not interested in reading. And I really sympathize with the neighbors in that neighborhood. I mean, the bus stop's one thing, but that was a neighborhood trail. You just walk from the Weir trail or from whatever neighborhoods around there. And unfortunately, COVID has brought a lot of people out here. It's a great place to visit and recreate. But I'm just wondering if maybe in that corridor, with the way the road is designed and the neighbors, this issues they've been dealing with, that is a no zone for parking, just the bus. I hate to say it, we're going to push it on to another neighborhood, but I think if we go with a no parking in that area right now, and I understand the the 2-hour thing, the concern I have with that is then the person that's enforcing has to go back out every 2 hours and chuck those tires or whatever, and I'm equally concerned that it's our fire people, they're the people that are, could do it. It's that when there's another call, hopefully they're going to that first and not being drawn so far away from our, well, hopefully in the truck. But once the apparatus is out there, we've got an emergency on this side because people have been negligent because they're not reading no parking. I have a problem with that. So I'm concerned about our emergency personnel being drawn out to frivolous ignorance of not reading a sign and then disrupting a neighborhood.
Okay. Great points. And the element here about putting up the barrier on the north edge of the trail, that's exactly where the bus stop is.
Okay.
How far we can go, we'll push it, I think. But we have to leave room for the bus, of course. And yeah, but
Okay.
based on what I've heard, it matches up your what you heard as well, is that parking is very haphazard in that area. So, okay, so I have to, Chief.
Can I speak
Yeah,
to
please,
briefly?
please.
Sorry. I think you all have some really great comments there. Oh, sorry. I think you all have some really great comments there. And I think the public that live around there are really, they know that area better than any of us. Enforcement every 2 hours, respectfully, would be really difficult to do. And if we're going to make it every 2 hours, we have to enforce it. So I would recommend that council writes a letter to William Head and to the buses. I think that's two big components, an easy thing that we can do. I think that we can get an agreement with the tow company and start towing. Because honestly, the year that we started towing, that did really quiet things down in kind of in the Sandgate area and down at Taylor Road, because now the rumor has spread pretty quick that we were towing. And right now I have to call in the tow, but maybe that's something that we can get them to do more monitoring of the situation themselves. I think the big risk is not just the parking, it is the parking, but having people park on William Head Road is dangerous. It's just a high risk area. While again, like many of you have said, I don't want to push parking up onto Pearson College Drive, but that is a safer road to have parking. If we're going to put it up though, we have to provide an area for it. We can't just expect people to try and find it wherever. It has to be visual so they can see where to park. It's just, I don't know how all that's done, but we need to get them off William Head Road. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's just not safe. I like the idea of rocks as opposed to the barriers, because the rocks you can kind of shift over a little bit, but don't take quite as much space, and it still allows for a safe walking area, a protected walking area, because that whole road along there, if you're walking from, if you're parking on Pearson College and you walk down to Sandgate, which many people do, that whole area is just very, very unsafe. If you look at Matheson Lake Road, if you push parking out, they park all the way halfway down Matheson Lake Road now. Like, it's crazy. So we've just made sure that it's only on one side of the road so we can still get fire apparatus down. And just touching on your point, Councillor Donaldson, we don't normally take an active fire apparatus to do enforcement. It tends to be my vehicle, just so that we make sure that we're not putting at risk the rest of the public just for doing parking enforcement. So throwing that out there. All right.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Thomas.
So in other areas where we've had concerns with speed on curbs and stuff, in a number of neighborhoods in the district, we've used the white delineators. That might be something that's a little less obtrusive. I don't know, it's a bit institutional, but it might be a start. They are flexible as well.
Okay. Okay, so we have the four options here, but I'd like to include a fifth one, which is we consider, and Ms. Hanson, I'm going to read you something here, that additional options for signage and traffic management be considered. And that would be the fifth option. So that opens the doors to either the white delineators, the rocks, and or additional signage. In terms of, I think it's a neat idea to post something about where parking is available. That might be. Yeah. Although again, I think one of the themes tonight is people they don't read signs so well. So, yeah, but.
Fair enough, but give them a chance. It sounds like a screwy place to be, and so if people think, gosh, I'll just slip in here versus, oh, that's where I'm supposed to park, I mean, it may help. I'm not saying it will, but worth a shot.
Okay. Meredith?
You know, I really have to, I'm quite passionate about this. I want to state this again. So if we're going to allow parking on the other side of the road, maybe we should reconsider what we're doing to the trail. Maybe you want to upgrade it for increased traffic. So we're doing one thing to make it a community trail, but then we're allowing parking in a very dangerous zone. And the fire chief, I mean, you really should pay attention to what the fire chief is saying. She's saying no parking along William Head there. Yeah. And I think we should heed her advice.
But, Mary, just for clarification, there is parking that's free and there's no parking. There is parking allowed on Pearson College Drive, but along William Head Road, there are no parking signs. And they just so often get ignored. Like even the area across the road from where the trail is.
There's no parking zone. I can't remember. Actually, there is, I think, parking enough for about 3 vehicles. But people squeeze into that no parking zone. Yeah. I think it's ambiguous, and I think no parking should be allowed there.
Would you like a motion for your 4 items?
Well, thank you. I was going to. I wasn't sure somebody had made a motion, and I just forgot. So.
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking this is a stepwise thing. Let's get going on it. And I think Mary Little's got a good point, but you guys have all taken a good look at it and studied it with a whole variety of people. Let's follow along. In other words, get these things done, see where we're at.
And Mary Little, sorry, I think your point is possibly covered in the 5th bullet there, that we look at additional options, and that may involve completely eliminating parking. And that's what I would like to see along that stretch of William Head Road as well. It's gone or severely. Yeah, I'd like to see it removed actually. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be a safe place to park. So, okay. So could I have a motion?
1, 2, 3. It's 5 points?
5 points, sure.
There are 4 points that are here, and then the 5th one was the additional options.
So I make a motion to accept the recommendations of the community planning, the 4 recommendations plus the 5th additional options for signage and traffic management.
Great. The seconder. Seconded by Councillor Donaldson, and any further discussion? Seeing no discussion, I will call the question. Okay. All in favor? Thank you. One final note on this. We're pushing to 10. There's a much bigger discussion about how we manage access and enjoyment to our beaches. And I'd like to bring that to further planning committee meeting. And we'll talk about it again. And thanks to Ms. Jones and Ms. Panton for raising these questions. It is something we have to grapple with as a community. So, okay. Now, one final agenda to talk about here, and
Dogs and Saturday parks.
We have correspondence. And this is from Erik and Sheila Lund regarding 4696 Beckingham Road. They've expressed concern about this subdivision proposal and the amenity zoning proposal, with a specific concern about water and the impacts to Hewitt Creek. So I did have a chance to talk to both Sheila, but especially Erik, and thought a little bit more about what their concerns were, and into my consideration of the proposal when it next comes to us. So, great. Thank you. Okay, so if you don't mind, could I have a motion to extend the meeting beyond 10 o'clock? So, Mayor Little and Councillor Donaldson, and all in favor? Okay, thank you very much. And, okay, so the next matter we put on other businesses, the question of dogs. And in this particular in this particular matter, we're talking about the incident that happened with Miss Summer earlier to her grandchild on Weedy Beach. But what it does is it raises a number of Weir's Beach, thank you. No, it was Weedy Beach, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought it was weird.
Yeah. So what is interesting about this situation, I'm going to ask Chief Dunlop to jump in here too, because she knows this situation fairly well. So what I'm to understand is that the CRD, their jurisdiction goes to the high, through the park of course, but to the high tide line on the beach, of course. After that, from the high tide line to the low tide line, that is provincial jurisdiction. And apparently in that case, the municipality has the ability to manage what goes on in that sort of intertidal zone. Now, what the situation is, and Ms. Summer was good enough to show me the correspondence she had from the CRD. They are good to enforce up to that high tide line, but after that, they're not going to be there in terms of enforcing in terms of dogs off leash. And I'm trying to think now, and from June 1st till September 15th, all dogs must be on leash when they hit the beach area. And so you have a situation where there's a potential of dogs being off leash, and the potential for enforcement is kind of absolutely up in the air. Unless, and what's interesting, of course, is that we contract with CRD bylaw to do bylaw enforcement. So there's an issue there. But Chief, anything, sorry, I'm kind of slowing down a little bit, but is what I'm saying accurate in terms of where the jurisdictional lines are?
Yes.
Okay.
This is what I know from just the beach fire aspect.
Yeah.
Sorry, okay.
Okay.
So in responding or doing any enforcement in beach areas, we don't cover, for example, beach fire down at Weedy Beach. We go to it because they don't, CRD does not go into any beach fires that are down on the beach area because it is provincial, and then you get into federal. So we can go and we put out the fires. We can adhere our municipal policy. We can enforce our municipal policies on that area, but we do not ticket. We don't fine because it technically isn't our area. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, with the dogs, I've been bitten out there doing bylaw fires before. Putting out beach fires and had a dog come and attack me. So yeah, the dogs are an issue out there because people think that they can do whatever they want in that tidal area.
Yeah.
So.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. What I would suggest is that there's a deeper conversation I think we have to have with the CRD, but I think we also have to look at what the options are for Metchosin in terms of enforcement on the beach areas. And in speaking with Ms. Summer, she made a really good point, is that the problem is not going to get any better. We are going to have visitors from the new arrivals in Royal Bay and the Central Mountain Estates development. Like, there will continue to be traffic there. What I would like to think is that if we don't have to be there each and every day, but if there's selected times that we can have some level of enforcement, and whether it's tickets or whether it's just somebody in a uniform being out there, not so much, educating, sure, but informing people that they have to have their dogs on a leash or at least under control. I think that might have an effect over time. But the question, of course, is how to do that and what budget do we have to do that. So I would propose that there be contact made with the CRD, and we work with staff and the fire chief as well, because she has experience in terms of managing issues on the beachfront, and we look at developing a plan for enforcement. So, Councillor Gray.
Sounds like a great idea. One thing that I do that Ms. Summers mentioned, the signs are confusing. Could there be a first step to have a talk to the CRD and say, could the CRD change the sign and say dogs must be on a leash from June 1st to September, whatever the date, September 15th? Because I would think the average citizen hasn't the faintest idea about this jurisdictional issues. But if the signs say when you get there, this is the deal, and I respect people not necessarily following every sign, but if the CRD would be open to that as a starter, in other words, not much more information except during this period of time we'd like your dogs to be on leash, or must be on leash. But I'm supporting your general notion of having a talk with everybody involved.
Great. Marilyn?
Yeah, as a CRD director, I think I could reach out to Ms. Hutchinson, Larissa Hutchinson, to ask her about this issue. Interestingly, so historically, we've convened this Dogs in Machosen working group. They had a number of recommendations to our bylaw and a number of other recommendations. The past council accepted all those recommendations, and it's now pushed to this council to fully accept those. And so I hate to go against all of the work that had been done regarding defining under control, but I'm also in the position that I've now reached out to Saanich Council, and they had a consultant to do a report and a survey to the tune of $250,000. And they came up with the conclusion that dogs should be welcome on all of the beaches as long as they're leashed. And so I think that's something that we need to consider in the future if we continue to have these conflicts. What the Dogs in Machosen working group was established because there were conflicts between wildlife and dogs, or livestock and dogs. And so we do have the ability to go to the Dogs in Machosen working group to discuss this again, but I think a good step would be, as Councillor Gray suggested, to start at the CRD and to ask them. And there's also conflicts as well at Devonian, very, very similar, almost identical conflicts at another CRD park in Machosen.
Thanks, Marilyn. And just considering the work that the Dogs in Machosen working group did, I think the dog under control definition is wonderful. It seems to work, but it's pretty abstract in a situation where you need to enforce something, or the dog is not in control. And then, I mean, debating with the owner about that is really a futile thing. So I think, we need to look at some steps. But the potential of having dogs on leash in beaches, I think might be something we have to look at. But of course, there's some other things that we can do first, whether it's education, enforcement, better signage. I think that would be worth looking at. But again, the problem is unlikely to get better. So what I would propose is, if I'm going to list this out. So in terms of action, that a call is made to the CRD and Marilyn. Oh, sorry, Councillor Thomas.
I just want to add one more thing. I know when I've been out in the various parks throughout Machosen, they're all a little bit different, Galapagos and the different beaches and some other ones. On the CRD one, specifically the Galapagos Trail, they do actually have, I don't know if rangers is the word, but they do have patrols on bicycles and that, and they definitely do talk to people with dogs on and off leash and that sort of thing. And it was a number of years ago, but they used to also set up information tables and stuff like that to talk to people. And I'm just wondering if they did a few of those at the beginning of summer, and now's a good time because it's June, and start getting people right at the entrance to these parks that are CRD parks. And I think signage is good. Not everybody's going to read them. I do, but that they start doing a little bit of PR so that people know that this is what is acceptable and this is what's not acceptable, and take some responsibility. But if they could reach out and do a bit of an education campaign, that certainly would be useful. Because we're going to be having more and more visitors all the time. You know, the population growth in the West Shore is phenomenal. So
yeah. a fabulous idea, and you need somebody that has some sort of authority, or even just works at the CRD and is identified as a CRD person to actually make that stick. I really dislike the idea of individuals trying to educate people, especially when the dog is likely at large and not under control. That just simply leads to conflict, as I've had experience with. But Marilyn.
Another action item could be that we could reach out to the Dogs in Chosen Working Group for them to start a campaign, an educational campaign, in terms of there's great expertise on that working group. And so they could, as they've suggested, write articles for the Metchosin News or the Goldstream Gazette. Probably the Goldstream Gazette would be a great idea, on what is proposed in the district and the problems that we're having, and to please have your dog under control, or we will be facing leashing.
Great. Yeah, wonderful idea. Okay, I'm wondering if I could get a motion to do the following. That a call is put into the CRD to discuss this situation, and some of the topics may be discussion of signage and education campaigns as well as enforcement. That Metchosin have a closer look and clarify where its enforcement opportunities are. And again, that is below the high tide line to the low tide line where federal authority begins. And then contact is made with the Dogs in Metchosin Working Group about the potential of an educational campaign that they might be able to conceive of as supportive. So those 4 items. The one idea that I've always wondered about is whether there's room for almost an ambassador program, where people, again, in identifiable vests, working in pairs or threes, tour around the parks, maybe in this case with their dogs in leash, and that's sort of an educational outlet. That may be something to consider. So, and it's just part of your dog walking routine. So, but okay. So those.
Yeah. CRD does that actually on horseback out towards Casinos and Souk, and they wear vests, and it's a bit cumbersome. There's a lot of paperwork to do and stuff, but that's what they were like, trail rangers on horseback, same sort of thing.
Yeah, it's that's a great point. I mean, you don't do an ambassador program just super easily. There's some planning that would have to do it. So yeah. Ms. Hanson, do you think you have the? Great. Okay. So could I have a motion to act on those 4 options, 3 options? Anybody? Marilyn. Seconded by Councillor Weir. And further discussion? No further discussion. I will call the question. All in favor? Great. Thank you very much. Okay. And I will take a motion to adjourn from Councillor Donaldson and from Councillor Weir. And